Okay, we are now live.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. This is our regular city council meeting held Saturday, August 1st at 10 in the morning. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg,
Here.
Mayor Stevens.
Here. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so if you guys can mute before you're talking, that'd be great. Lisa? Yep, okay, there it is. Our first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for verbal motion would be great.
I can move that.
Great.
Now that I'm unmuted, I can second.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, that agenda passes. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. We have several minutes to approve here as we have had several public meetings in the past few days. So I will look for motions on those.
Move.
I will still move.
Second.
Is that for
George
the
or Tom, are we allowed to move all of them at once, or do we have to do that in a separate motion?
Sorry, I think you should do one at a time.
Beautiful. All right. So
I'll move the minutes for the regular meeting.
okay. That is Lisa, do you second?
I'll second.
Okay. That was a motion to move the regular council special meeting on July 29th, 2020. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, those are passed. I will then make a motion for the city council to move the city council discussion only special meeting minutes for July 30th, 2020.
I'll second.
Okay, it has been seconded by Councilmember Babcock. Any discussion or changes?
Nope.
All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Wonderful. I will also move the city council discussion only special meeting minutes from July 31st, 2020.
Second.
It has been seconded by Councilmember Babcock. Are there any discussion on this or changes?
No.
All right. Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. We are now on to the communications part of the agenda. All written communications received by council are posted in the online agenda packet. If there's something that you don't see up there that you want to see up there, this is a little bit of a weird time for a meeting. So Emily, what was the cutoff time on written communications? Because we have been receiving a lot of emails.
I posted it at 9 o'clock this morning.
Okay,
so after 9 o'clock this morning.
And is it up until 9 o'clock that all those things were on there?
Yes. Yeah, I did it after 9 o'clock. So, yep.
Okay, great. So if you don't see an email on there, it might be because you sent it after 9 or received it after 9. But if you don't see something up there that you should, we actually got an email about that earlier today. Very, very happy to put that on the written communications agenda. So thank you for that. Our next item is communications from the audience. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to list the call-in number and the meeting ID. I've been doing that for the past couple of meetings, and honestly, I've gotten some good feedback on it. I think it's it's not the worst thing in the world to, give people actually the information to call in. And, as well, I'm going to reiterate that we did pass a resolution at an earlier meeting to limit the time for public comment on virtual meetings to 5 minutes. There's going to be a timer that's going to come up and pop up on the screen. Our city council secretary, Emily Gordon, will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. That timer will really only be going for when you are speaking. So I'm going to read off that number first, and then we're going to get into the participants. So the call-in number is 312-626-6799. Again, that call-in number is 312-626-6799. And the meeting ID that you would need to enter into the meeting is 825-1863-1525. Again, that meeting ID is 825-1863-1525. Anybody that wants to call in, feel free. We're going to be taking public comment right about now. So Emily, can you let the first caller in?
Yep, the first caller with the phone number ending in 374, you are now permitted to address council.
Hi, this is Jim Kroom. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, just a short comment in favor of Peter Dewan. I've served with Peter on the DDA for numerous years. Council and the public have seen his dedication to the city, serving on not only the DDA, the BRA, but also the Planning Commission and others. Peter has a number one, open mind on issues. Number two, a very cordial style and very communicative style. He's thoughtful, very committed to the city of East Lansing. And that would be the end of my comment. Thank you, three, for serving and for your thoughtful process on the appointment process.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Our next caller.
Okay, the next caller will be a phone number ending in 534. You are now permitted to address council.
Hi, this is Ann Hill at 685 Buteo. Council members, I'd like to thank the council for your openness and transparency during this process. And I appreciate the personal sacrifices of your time and energy that you gave to make this happen, as well as that of your family. I also appreciate the many members of the community that were willing to participate in the process. It was a surprise to me to see the number of candidates from the HRC committee, and I'm not sure if that was due to the national conversations that are going on, or if there was a concerted effort, from that group. There were many excellent candidates, but many seem to have a single focus that is deep rather than a broader knowledge and experience base with which to hit the deck running. I'm concerned about that from the perspective of our council needs to be broad and diverse and to be able to look at things, analyze things from many different perspectives and not just a primary single one. However, after watching all of the interviews, I selected my choice for the two vacancies and an honorable mention. They are in rank order with my reasons for selecting them. First, Ron Bacon. In my opinion, Ron showed great versatility, demonstrated leadership skills and vision. He was able to clearly and concisely articulate the thoughts. His formal education, work life, and community service experiences clearly allow him to look at things from various angles of the prism. He can get down in the weeds when necessary, but also looks for things from a 50,000-foot perspective. He's demonstrated his willingness to continuously grow and learn while helping to lift others up. His fluency and working knowledge of finance will be extremely beneficial. Some specific comments that drove me to select him are: triage what happened in 2020, prioritize and allocate, and where are the risks. He discussed current COVID, but recognized that there will be a post-COVID. Learn from what worked and what didn't. He referred several times to budget concerns. He wants to reestablish the vision of what East Lansing is, the need for reconciliation and building public trust, and no matter who is losing, don't move the goalposts. My second choice is Rod Murphy. In my opinion, Rod showed leadership, vision, humility, integrity, and ethics. He understands that because of the manner in which council was disrupted, it will be difficult to bring trust to the group. He has demonstrated firsthand experience in bringing groups with opposing views together and building them up in the process. He has a strong working knowledge of finances and the ability to see the obvious and the not so obvious impacts that COVID will have. For example, MSU moving to online learning could move that fewer people will be willing or able to spend as much on the college experience. and the impact that this could have on the city. He also has an understanding of the human experience and how important unique mom and pop businesses are that serve as anchors for our neighborhoods and cities. History serves as a guide to the future for him. We need some big box stores, but it is the small businesses that build the character of the city, unique little things about a town that make it something. They serve as anchors for neighborhoods, if not the whole city, and they add zest and texture, which I love that. Some specific comments that drove me to select him are, we cannot chase after the ideal that is never going to be attained. We can look at the ideal and say that this is the direction we want to go, but must choose what is actually doable. We will provide the necessities because that's all we can afford. Building at the margins needs to come from the private sector and donations. And I love, again, the zest and texture when it comes to the small businesses. Finally, my honorable mention candidate is Chuck Grigsby. Chuck's life experiences have provided him with unique opportunity to be an excellent role model and mentor for others. While his experiences have provided him with the ability to see things from different perspectives, I don't believe he currently has the depth and breadth of my first and second candidate choices. I believe that adding financial experience and more hands-on management would help broaden these perspectives for him. Again, I thank you for allowing the public to weigh in on
30
this very,
seconds
very
remaining.
difficult process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann.
Thanks, Ann.
Okay, our last caller is a caller with a phone number ending in 963. You are now permitted to address council.
Hi, this is Alice Traeger. I'm actually not the last caller. Ray Blassen let me know he's trying to call in and got a strange recording, so I gave him the information, and I would just ask that you make sure that Ray gets on before you end public comment.
Not a problem.
My comment is not on, per se, the issue of who you should choose, but rather an important gap that I think you need to keep an eye on, and that is the issue of money and budgeting. The income tax appears to be getting slammed by the fact that we set it up in a non-COVID time to deal with the idea of drawing money from non-resident MSU employees. Those non-resident MSU employees are now not having to pay income tax to the city of East Lansing, because when they work remotely, they pay tax in the place they're working from. It looks pretty likely that MSU may have to go largely online in the fall, given everything that's going on nationally. That will prolong this, and in any case, a lot of the people who are going to be working at MSU in the fall, even if MSU opens on campus, they're going to be working from home. So this is going to crush us in the income tax. The income tax still has to pay out the property tax reduction, and so that large property tax reduction doesn't get reduced. What gets reduced is our net income. It looks to me, as I look back at the Plant Moran report, that we're looking at losing millions of dollars this year from the income tax that we had planned to get. Parks and Rec is also not drawing any money and is spending a lot of money at the moment, which Ann Hill has talked quite eloquently about. The parking system appears to me to be on track for losing somewhere between $2 and $4 million this year. There's no way around that. Normally in fines, we make a lot of money because there's a lot of people in town. For example, last year we made $1 million in parking tickets. We seem to now be making zero in parking tickets, or very close to zero. In addition, permits has been a place where we've gotten income. The city of Chicago yesterday announced that their permitting process is down 50% from normal and the lowest level ever seen in terms of relative to their economic base. So yesterday, the $600 a week unemployment benefits from the federal government have ended. MSU is cutting money everywhere. My spouse, who's one of the top administrators at MSU, just took a 7% pay cut. The state is not going to have money. The state is making clear they're going to have to pull back money from municipalities, from schools, from universities. So we've already lost millions of dollars that we are not going to be able to recover. Even if magically tomorrow the coronavirus dies out or there's a vaccine tomorrow, we are going to be millions in the hole this year. I am at a loss to understand why there's been no discussion of this at City Council, why there have not been brought numbers forward, why there are not emergency budgeting sessions going on. And I'm also confused as to what's going on with regard to the rehiring of people. If we just laid off a whole bunch of people who are now not getting $600 a week from the federal government, it seems important that the people know that. If we just hired all those people back, it's important that we understand how the heck we're going to afford that. We're going to have to look at really tragic decisions in the next couple of years with regard to everything. There is no way around this. I would like City Council to immediately take up this discussion. I know you only have one meeting right now scheduled in August, and I don't think there's been any plan to even discuss the budget. I don't understand that. As I'm watching East Lansing Public Schools meetings, MSU meetings, budget discussions are at the top of everything. So I am baffled as to why we seem to be behaving as if we don't need to be talking about money. So as you go into this decision, what I would say is that you all have a lot of strengths, but you really need to fill the strengths that you don't have. And given what we are facing, and given that you can't do anything without money, given that the best idea in the world is impossible in a municipal system without money, you've got to pay a lot of attention to who's going to fill that gap in terms of their ability not only to understand it, but to understand the critical importance of it, to understand that nothing is possible without funding, and that decisions that are nauseating are going to have to be made in the next few months. So thank you. And again, I would just ask that if Ray Blasson has not managed to make it in, that you please allow time for him to do that. He's not called me again, so I believe he should be able to get in. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you for that. And if we need to wait a little bit before somebody gets in, that's all good with me, honestly. Jesse, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify one thing in Alistair's comments. We did talk about scheduling 2 additional meetings in August, so we are now back to 3, 2 regular and 1 discussion meeting in August. So there is much more council time currently on the calendar.
And I actually think that those comments are apt in terms of like giving us and the public an update on budget issues. I mean, we've talked about it in terms of like individual funds, right? When we had the conversation about extending parking, you know, and some different aspects. But if we could, you know, I know that the discussion only meeting on the 18th that we had talked about doing, we wanted to revolve around COVID, but if we could also get a presentation from maybe Jill Feldposh, our finance director, to tell.
I'd be happy to provide information, what we have up to date on the budget at that point.
Thanks, appreciate it. All right, Emily, do we have anybody else?
Yep, we do have one more caller. So caller number, or with the number ending in 314, you are now permitted to address council.
Hello, this is Ray Lawson. Am I connected?
Yep.
Yes.
Well, good morning to Mayor and distinguished council members. It appeared from the council interactions on Wednesday evening that you will be proceeding with discussions to extend the city manager's contract and may do so without a performance evaluation. Also, it appears that this action would be undertaken quite soon, possibly before the 2 new appointees are up to speed. If these impressions are correct, I respectfully ask in the strongest terms possible that you please adjust your plan as follows. First, please delay undertaking any discussions of the city manager's contract until the 2 new council members are in position to participate fully in this crucial deliberation. Second, please plan to conduct and complete a performance evaluation before conducting the contract negotiations or an extension with the city manager. The current council members, the new council members, and the city manager need to be fully aware of the basis on which the city manager's contract negotiations or possible extension will be undertaken and occur. And the citizens of East Lansing need to be assured that the council actions are well planned, factually grounded, and fair to all parties, including the East Lansing taxpayers. Third, please consider in that performance evaluation both actions and inactions by the city manager in years prior to 2020 and the manager's actions and inactions in this challenging year. The new council members will need to be brought up to speed on these performance conditions to be able to make their independent, informed decisions when asked to fully deliberate about and vote on the resulting actions. Fourth, crucially important in the city's current and yet unprojected future financial conditions. As a prior member of the city's financial health team, I fear East Lansing will discover shortly it is facing a disastrous financial situation from the COVID-19 revenue reductions, along with the various continuing and rising expenses. The city will need a strategy for dealing with this disastrous situation, possibly including executive and staff salary reduction, if not position terminations. Many other cities have addressed the projected impact of COVID-19 pandemic. East Lansing has not. Fifth, please consider that the salary level to be talked about is crucial in any contract extension. The likely real and massive financial shortfall by the city, as well as salary competitiveness, should enter into any salary decisions for the city manager. And then sixth, if the performance evaluation and related analysis show that an extension of the contract may not be justified, then a target date for exiting the position should be provided with whatever supportive exit adjustments would enable the current city manager to relocate. This may become a vital part of the resulting deliberations by the 5 council members. I respectfully recommend these process improvements to you in the spirit of helpfulness. Also, to be helpful, I plan to send council a more detailed copy of these comments, and I'm asking that you please share that copy with the 2 new council members being appointed. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to share these recommendations, and I deeply appreciate all the good work that you're undertaking. Ray Blossom.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ray, and
Thank
thanks
you,
for
Mr.
putting in
Thank
those
you, sir.
questions beforehand, too. All right, is there any other participants that are on the call?
It looks like we have one more caller that just joined. So caller
Cool.
number with the number ending in 715, you are now permitted to address council.
And I'll say other people should call in too, if they set the time. Go ahead.
Hello.
Sorry. Yep.
My name is Rich Shoemaker. I guess I wanted to mention briefly the persons that from the interviews the last couple of days that I preferred and why. Janelle Cannon, Paul earlier said something about budgeting concerns, etc. And she seems to me somebody who would be well suited to dealing with that sort of thing. Also, I heard something very refreshing from Adam DeLay, and that is that he recognized that the Historic District Commission, or actually the institution of that regulation, is really another form of redlining, and I think that needs to be recognized. Other high-value candidates, I guess I would call Dina Watson, Bezel Taylor, Jennifer Carrera, and Rod Murphy. A lot of the ones I didn't mention I felt were checking boxes for approval. And I heard a few people mention their favoring of concrete and steel over lumber construction, which is a very clear message to me that I don't prefer those people as council members. I also think that to preserve the actions that you've taken in the last few weeks, you need to consider how you might increase the size of the city council and institute geographic representation, wards or whatever you want to call them. And I think you need a substantial number of people there. I don't know how that comes out as far as how much they get paid, whatever. But as it currently stands, a little bit of money can be applied to gain control of 2 seats every time there's an election, and when only 2 or 3 seats are up for grabs, it makes it easy for moneyed interests to gain control. I I also have some issues I guess I'd like to bring to the table, but not in this forum, as far as where there may be money on the table that nobody can see. And I guess I would like to try and schedule a meeting either with Lisa Babcock or with all three of you to talk about that, but I don't want my comments in public.
Okay, just as a note, we would not be able to meet all three at one time with you. Although if you would like to meet with Councilmember Babcock or any of the City Council, you can email them individually and schedule something to sit down. I know I'm always happy to sit down with somebody or Zoom call with somebody, or sit 6 feet away from them in a park if they want to have a conversation with me, or just hop on the phone. So not a problem.
And I have one more comment, I guess. I forgot this. I probably should have led with this, but what you did a few weeks ago, I consider heroic, epic. I've been waiting 70 years for that. Thank you.
Sir? Sir, before
Pardon?
you go?
I can't understand what you said.
Oh, sir, before you go, if you could email me at L, as in Lisa, Babcock at City of East Lansing, I would be more than happy to meet with you. And one other thing, I didn't catch the first name you said.
Richard?
No, I'm sorry, the first potential council member.
Oh, I'm sorry, Janelle Cannon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Let's be in touch soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next
Emily?
person.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, the next person that we have on is Abigail Taikaki. You are West Council.
Abby, you might need to unmute. Oh, looks like we lost her.
Hi, apologies. Didn't realize I had been called. A pass. I'm just here to listen.
All right.
I believe we have one more caller. I might have called on this one, but the caller with the phone number ending in 491.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to say, as someone who applied to be a candidate for the City Council, I personally wanted to recognize Mr. Stevens for stepping up with his actions in contacting every candidate that applied prior to your meeting on Wednesday. He did briefly mention it. It got glossed over at that meeting, and I wanted to be sure that everyone heard and to applaud him for his class act actions in contacting the 21 or 22 candidates individually, just to say, thank you so much for applying. I think this shows that he is being a great leader. I think that it shows again that he is stepping up to a role that I'm sure he'd never thought he would be in. And I just wanted to personally thank him again, and to thank him on behalf of the other 20 or 21 candidates that he made all those phone calls and wanted to be sure it was recognized. Thank you.
Thanks. That put a smile on my face, definitely. But sorry, I don't want to get emotional on that. But no, it is.
It's hard to be humble.
It is very, very important, and the reason why I did call those people, and I really, I wasn't going to talk about it as much, but is, a pastor a little while ago told me about a story between belief and faith. And I always had a belief that people would step up to the plate. But having faith, I think, is a different thing. And he told a story about Niagara Falls and somebody that would walk a tightrope. And if you have the belief that somebody can walk that tightrope without any problem until he asks you to stand on his back while he does it. And then your belief is either belief or faith. And if you have faith, you'll hop on and let him walk through. But I always had belief and I always had faith that our community would step up. And I think those are both really important things. And when I saw the amount of incredible candidates that did, I just really wanted to reach out and say thank you, because pushing for public service and putting yourself out there and saying, I want to step up and get involved is a hard thing to do. But it's a beautiful thing. And it's why this community is great. And it's why I had full faith that it was going to happen. So thanks for that. And thanks again to everybody that applied.
Well, thank you all for your service.
Okay, I believe that's everybody for the callers, so we should be set.
Okay, I am gonna read off one more time the call-in information. The call-in information is 312-626-6799. The meeting ID is 825-1863-1525. Again, call-in information is 312-626-6799. The meeting ID is 825-1863-1525. And with council's okay, I'm gonna just wait for a minute or two just to make sure if anybody does want to talk. This is a really important meeting that we get them in there. So I'm gonna mute myself for a second, put a timer on my phone for a couple of minutes, and just wait for a sec. Alrighty, Emily, did we have anybody else call?
We just had one more join, a
Oh,
caller
cool.
with a phone number ending in 954.
All right, perfect, thank you.
Oh, hello, this is Nicole Vibert. I'm one of the applicants, and this morning, actually, I wanted to make sure that all the applicants are included as part of the public invited to come speak, and that is an affirmative. So I would like to encourage, because there is a lag actually between the iPad and the iPhone. I was trying to listen to both because when I call in with my phone in the past, it like loses the feed, so I didn't want to miss anything. But I noticed there is a bit of a lag with the two feeds. So anyways, I better get to the 5 minutes. I would like to say that when I spoke up at this past interview and I had this statement I made, it was to make a statement that I felt confident would be listened to and heard. by the city council and by people in our community, because that's who we get our confidence from. We're the ones who currently don't see each other as much at the store, but see each other standing among one another in the neighborhoods, and also, as I mentioned, showing up to things where we say, here is an injustice that needs to be repaired. I would feel comfortable serving on city council only if that is not a conflict of interest with standing with justice movements. And people like, I really enjoyed hearing what Bazile, I think Taylor had to say, and Dana Watson had to say. People that I would understand want the good together. And I'm not saying other people don't want the good together. And this is pretty extemporaneous because I did prepare very carefully what I said for the interview. I think that we can have this chance to see, like what Danielle Cannon said. That's a shout out to her. She is very familiar to me, a very familiar point of view. And among all of us, this is a familiar point of view to foreground compassion, to foreground our children. If I'm not selected for city council, that's fine. And I'll keep speaking up, you know, and if it's I would never leave behind my Sunrise Youth friends or this beautiful earth we see around us that could our hands be put on it to heal. That can be what we're paying each other to do. Janelle was awesome because she said, frankly, have some of that money that's way more than anyone needs, and know that we are the ones who supply each other's needs. The transformation could happen, and the one we're looking for, the one that I'm saying out loud, is that what we do with our hands every day, where we put our hearts, that's how we interact. Why not have it be that we're measuring it in lessened asthma attacks because our air is cleaning up? Why can't it be that we measure success in, well, the bird populations are exploding and our children took the data out in their streets because they made it happen? That's the measure. That's an organizing principle. And I want all these minds that we're talking about finance and realizing it. And one more thing that Janelle said, she said forthrightly, claw that money back from those who are taking too much and hurting the rest of us, who took and clear cut the land and put plantations up. And that is still hurting us. It's the same decision to cut it down and oppress made every day we don't regrow it and lift everyone up together doing so. It's practical. It is eminently practical. And there's plenty of people like me standing up now saying, we will not watch it just burn away. And we together are the ones.
You have 30 seconds
who
remaining.
can grow it back. Grow that back. You wouldn't be disappointed. Come around Pinecrest. You know, I love the garden. They show up. Those insects show up again, the birds, everyone else, and it heals our heart. We are heartbroken as a people, as a species, because we don't have that connection of beauty and our own self-resiliency or earth resiliency. We need that, and we need one another to trust that we can bring it.
Thank you, Nicole.
With our hands.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. All right, and I apologize. I normally don't like to cut off folks, but just to be fair to everybody that only has 5 minutes, I did just want to put that in there, but I do appreciate the comments that was made. I will touch on some of the things that Nicole honestly just said in a little bit when we have the discussion on the vacant seats. Emily, anybody else?
It does not look like we have any more callers at this time.
Okay, here's the fun part. So our next item on the agenda is our business agenda. We only have one item on our business agenda, which is the selection of 2 applicants to fill vacant council member seats. So when in creating this agenda item report, what I tried to do with the help of Quinn, Alexander, and Emily is create somewhat of a timeline of the process with links and even shout out Quinn, but timestamps on when interviews began, access to all of it, so it'd all be in one place here. So if you want to look at that, obviously we're going to be hopefully coming to a decision today. But if you do want to look at that and look at the process that happened before, please do. I think it's all there. Although if I missed a couple of steps or hiccups, then that's on me. But I think we got most of it there. Although I will say I am now the mayor, not the mayor pro tem, as the staff contact. Not a big deal at all. But so basically how I thought about structuring this really was an open conversation with both of the 2 other council members. I think that probably many, and I really hope this isn't an expectation, but maybe a different council, maybe a different government would probably come in and make a motion or 2 on those people. I don't want to start out with a motion. I want to start out with a conversation. And so with the other council members' permission, I think that we should just have an open conversation about what we liked, what we disliked, what we thought was really impressive, and, policy points that folks made, just a real open conversation around this, because I don't honestly know where Jesse's at on who she'd like to appoint. I don't know where Lisa is. And I think that's cool. And it's a little bit messy, certainly. And I know that, but I know that those in the community would probably really appreciate just hearing through our thought processes and having us, deliberate in public. So I can start out to set somewhat of a tone if you guys are okay with that, or if one of you would like to start, that's more than fine with me.
I am delighted to have you start, Mr. Mayor.
All right. And again, this is somewhat unprecedented, so I don't have a clear structure on this, but I'm going to just kind of get into it. So I'm going to start off with a few things that I heard during interviews and applications that I love to hear. And if I'm looking down at another screen, it's just because I have it up in front of me because I wanted to make sure that I got points correctly. So I'm going to go through each of the positives that I say, and when I say that like everybody had something to offer, I really mean it. And I won't be rehashing every point every individual made. So if I touch on one thing that someone said and not another, it's not because I don't support or agree with their other points. It's just, some examples of like really valuable things that I think folks said and some general takeaways that I had. So I'll start with Dr. Biber. She just chimed in public comment. She touched on a lot of really great environmental points, and she did during her public comment here too. But one thing that honestly stuck out to me really specifically was a point that she made on talking about Indigenous voices, talking about being a child of poverty, a mother of 3. And this is the exact wordage that she used. She said, needing the need in society for those perspectives to be counted as valuable. And I thought that was really powerful because, you have a conversation about representation, you have a conversation about who's at the table. But, equity, when you talk about this, it's not about who's invited to the party. It's about who feels comfortable at the party, right? And so when you talk about what perspectives are being counted as valuable, I mean, that gets to the essence of what representation is. And I know that she made a lot of other really, really great points, but I did want to touch on that just because I think it's important. And I think that, when we're having this conversation about who we want to have a voice on this council, it should be part of our decision that it's not just having the person in the room, it's making sure that they feel empowered to use their voice and that their voice is valued equally with that of somebody else. And, regardless of what happens, that is something that I will take very much to heart. in terms of being somewhat of a leader in this council. So I did want to touch on that. Dr. Carrera next, and I'm going through somewhat of, you know, where interviews stacked up, and it's not really any particular order, but she had some incredible experience actually getting, understanding, and making decisions based on input and communication from a community. And I want to put this out there because I constantly say, like, let's get public input on things. Let's get public input on things. And, you know, her actual real world academic experience in doing that was really cool. And of course, she has a lot of other qualifications that are really, really great. But I think it's a very difficult skill to master. And it is one that is very valuable in this role. She also said something that I think was very, very profound, where she said, a year is not a long time, but history is written in moments, and we can lay the groundwork for moving forward, right? And I think that that's apt, because this appointed, you know, role, you're either going to have to run for re-election in 2021, or you serve the appointed role and then, you know, you did your service to the community. But either way, it isn't a long time in terms of, you know, being an elected official. And there's a learning curve to that as well. Even if you've been elected in the past, there's so many things going on that previous governments have never interacted with, never faced before. And so, you know, when she said that, I made a note of it, because I said, you know, this is a short amount of time, but laying the groundwork going forward is important. So I thought that was really great. I'll move on to Dan Bowman. So Dan, I thought, did excellent in his interview. I thought his experience working within the city informed a lot of his answers. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we need a bit of experience around the table. But you mentioned specific policies that I honestly would like to work on no matter what happens, you know, during this conversation. He had a conversation, and I made this note just because it was something that I really hadn't thought about. But he said something about lot consolidation to move towards, you know, more dense and up-to-date housing. And I mean, one, it speaks to, you know, his experience on the Planning Commission, but two, I mean, when you think about the master plan, the reality of actually trying to achieve it, you know, that's something that's tangible that, you know, when you really think about, you know, how many individual companies own plots of land that are right next to each other, right? And where you want to move to maybe townhomes or different areas. I mean, that's cool. And of course, that's a very small point in a very long interview. And I'm trying to say that if I don't make a point about every single thing, I'm just kind of going through individual takeaways. But it also showed he understood the nuances of how to move the city forward and understood a deeper understanding of policies that we could put in place to go forward. And even if you don't agree with that, I think it showed that depth. I also just think he was fairly candid, you know. I think that, you know, he's speaking a lot from the heart, and so that was really cool. Janelle Cannon speak really highly of CATA and public transportation in general, which I agree with 100%. Of course, this is something that she talked about kind of mid-interview, and I'm going to get into some of the points that she made later. But I do think it's a huge asset that we have in this community, and I think that, you know, her perspective as well, you know, talking about that she wouldn't be able to have a career, a family without that access. That's not just her experience. That's a lot of people's experience. But it is something that when you talk about having an inclusive community, it's important. And it was a really good point that was made due to her own experience, but it is something that we should be recognizing, definitely. So I did love that point. She talked about, you know, transitioning from policing to public safety. She mentioned our pension issues specifically, and had a clear understanding for the reasoning behind the issues that we're facing and the commitment that we made. And I think everybody in the community felt this, but one of her most powerful points was supporting reparations for Black and Brown people in this country. And I think that she made that point, and it's a difficult thing to talk about at a public meeting. And it's a powerful, powerful statement. And I was very moved. So I wanted to appreciate that. You know, I think that Andrew Newman served his country. He wants to serve his community. He touched on the need to integrate technology into our work and really working with schools to foster a good environment for kids. I honestly, you know, I think that his service, you know, and it emulated this in the interview too, but, you know, his service mindset was the reason why he applied. And I think that he really, went in there thinking, I'm going to apply, throw my hat in the ring because I want to make this community a better place. He loved this city, and I think that while he didn't have necessarily the experience working within the city system that I was looking for, I think I could see that passion, and I'd be really happy to have him maybe in a different role. So Peter Dewan was the last interview on that day, but honestly, I thought it was a rock star interview. So much experience within the city, and I saw a good vision from him when he was speaking. He talked about restoring trust in our government, being okay with looking in the mirror and seeing something we don't want to, but then, being able to work and make that something into something that we do want to see. He talked on protecting East Lansing in terms of development, and the theme for many interviews, and a theme for many interviews as well in terms of economic development, was creating a city where children could grow up and actually stay and have a job here. I think that's really important. Retaining talent, and again, a lot of people mention this, but I think he articulated it well. Retaining talent in this area is a really, really big deal, and having somebody that has that understanding is really important. And that showed me, he understands the commitment that it takes. I'm going to make one last point about Peter's interview that I think somebody else did as well in the last in the second day of interviews, but he thanked his family at the end, and he said very specifically, I thank my family for letting me apply, and and had a conversation with them about it. And to those who haven't served in elected office before, I think there's 2 points to that. One is obviously thanking your family for being your support system, but the other is the fact that that means that he understands what the time commitment is, the hours that it takes, the hours that you don't get to spend at home, because that is part of the job. And again, it's a small thing, and it is nuanced, but this is a huge time commitment, and it is not going to slow down with COVID and a lot of reform coming down and budgetary issues coming down the pipeline. So I thought that was apt, and I think that it showed understanding the time commitment there. So going to the next day, Chuck has been one of my biggest allies, somebody that I call on when I need advice, somebody that calls me when we want to talk through issues. When I first interviewed him for the Human Rights Commission over a year ago, I knew right then he was going to be an asset to the community. I mean, I just, you know it, and anybody that's talked to him, that. And I asked him then, honestly, what's the plan? Do you want to stay here? Do you want to be serving? Do you want to be, going higher? And he always said, and of course, people that know him will know that this, he wants to help the youth in our community. Is a strong desire to make sure that young people have access, young people have, the ability to actually, have a bright future going forward, and also are able to feel comfortable in their own skin, in their own scenario. And so, he just wanted to make the community as great as it would be. And, I don't think nobody cares more deeply than him and gets as involved as him, if he believes it's the right thing to do. And, a lot of people mentioned being the liaison to the Human Rights Commission as, one of the commissions that they wanted to do. And, as some of you know, that is my current liaison position. I was on the HRC before I was elected to council. And I will say Chuck is one of a very select amount of people that I would be happy to step away and let him take the lead of that. So that speaks probably to his character and a number of other things, but it is the truth. And so I can't speak highly enough of him and his commitment to service. He was also part of the Emerging Leaders Program, and he's making a lot of effort right now to learn a lot more about city government and how we run. And he mentioned that a few times in his interview. Yeah, I think that, we're getting to the point where, Adam DeLay, for instance, he has a lot of experience in actual elected office, which is really, really valuable. And you could see that in his interview. Understanding the complexities of that role, it's not easy. There is a learning curve. And by the way, I think there's a learning curve, even if you've served in elected office before, coming to this new one. He mentioned a lot of great accomplishments, and points to, a lot of things, but one that I want to implement regardless of the conversation here is honoring Dr. Green. Something that I've talked about before, and now that I'm in this seat, I think it's important. We need to recognize the struggles, the wrongs that this city has been a part of, and recognize the struggle it was to even be in the room before. And I think that was apt. And whether it's Dr. Green or another person of color, woman of color, that made incredible lengths in this community, I think we do need to honor those people that fought before, and those that are still fighting for equity within this city. And to move on to John Monberg, he touched on managing a budget crisis, building a sense of trust between students and long-term residents. He touched on specifically having a heart of the downtown again, which I thought was a really nice, use of words, and in the way that he described it, I won't be able to describe it as well as he did, but he also spoke, on an issue that I think is very difficult to attain, which is getting to a place where we can effectively communicate things like form-based code, development proposals, urban form, global cities, and structures to the community, right? And it's very difficult to do that in just a press release. It's very difficult to do that while we're just sitting here. But he has experience in that, and having somebody focused on that communication is really, really cool. And it's vital, because we have a lot of things that are happening in our downtown, regardless of, the current situation in this country. And, so it is important that we're keeping people informed on that. And he gave a good shout out to his debate team partner, Eddie. I looked him up after the interview and he was right to give him props. And that's all I'll say on that. But so I'll move on to Basile Taylor. I did not know him before this interview, but man, do I want to know him after. He touched on not only criminalizing poverty, encouraging a diverse business community, and by the way, he happens to be doing research right now at a Southern Texas university to create policies and recommendations on community policing. There were some incredible points made by him. I was just so impressed at that interview, and he might not have like East Lansing specific experience right now, but he should be a resource for us. At the least. And honestly, I could see him being on this council being very, very effective. And again, I will say this, any of these people could be on this council and be so effective. So I'm just speaking to my own takeaways and my own perceptions, but I wanted to kind of just do this in public so that way, people knew where my head was at on things. But I was just blown away by Mr. Taylor's interview. So Rod Murphy, there were several very difficult points that he made that are a reality for us. He touched on making cuts that we don't want to make, devastation that the virus has had on our economy, and the special circumstance that we are in. And this was noted by another caller. The special circumstances that we are in with having students be a huge driver for our economy here, and the reality that if they're not here year round, we are going to have an adverse reaction here, and we already will. And we need to be ready for that. And I think he was one of the few people that really, really touched on that in depth. And I think that it's apt. And I know that regardless. I also just think he is and he said this he is about service. He says, I want to be service to this community. I want to be, ready to help. And that's my goal. Right. So he also touched about recruitment and diversity, which I thought was a really cool take. And he said, people talk about, well, we didn't have the applicants, right? Why didn't they apply in terms of diversity? But he said, well, what was the reach out? Did you intentionally reach out to candidates of diverse backgrounds to get those seats filled? And I just thought that was really apt. I thought that was a really good note. And when we're having these conversations about equity and diversity, when you talk about diversity in the workplace, I just think that that's a really, really good, point that was made. He also said something that I'm going to probably touch on later in a point of privilege after we maybe come to a decision here, but that he said moving to consensus is not always necessary. And I agree. I really do. I think that, we need to have 3-2 votes. We need to have 1-4 votes. We need to have 4-1 votes. You know, we need to be unanimous sometimes, and actually we don't. I mean, we don't need to be anything. We need to have a variety of it. And you know, if we all agree on everything, great. If we don't all agree on everything, great. Because that's what people elected us for. It's to talk about things. And so I thought that his point on moving to consensus not being necessary was really great. And now I'll get to the last two people, which at this point are my top 2 picks. And this was extremely difficult for me because I cannot stress this enough. The folks that we had apply were the top tier people that we could have in this council, and I would be proud to serve with any of them. And that's why we're having this conversation in public. That's why I'm ready to hear what Councilmember Babcock and Mayor Pro Tem Gregg are saying, just because it is important, and I would be proud to serve with any of them. But these are my top 2 at this point, and it was a very hard decision. I didn't sleep much last night because I was watching the interviews over. I was looking over the applications again. So my first selection for myself personally, again, it's a vote, it has to be unanimous, so everybody gets an equal say, was Ron Bacon. Ron Bacon has experience in East Lansing spanning more than a decade. He was the former chair of the Human Rights Commission. He has public and private sector experience, a criminal justice and sociology bachelor's, a master's in administration and organizational leadership. He's not only involved in the MLK Commission, but that now spans several jurisdictions, speaking again to a need for regional cooperation, which we had touched on at some point in this process before. He's also been a part of our Emerging Leaders program. He's heavily involved with the East Lansing Public Schools. He's a board member of their foundation and the varsity football coach. His financial experience, his assessment of risks and talking about the budget and COVID response concern. I was just very, very impressed, not only with the interview, but also his background of community work, his, commitment to equity, his experience being actually the chair of a commission in the city and then moving towards, community work that was not necessarily focused directly, on city commissions, but it was focused on things that truly affected that. So I was really, really impressed. I think that he has a background that we really, really need. And so that's what made that decision for me to put him in my top 2. The next person is Dana Watson, and she is I'm not saying one's higher than the other, but she is the second person that I am at least as the top 2 for me. So she's a fierce advocate for what she believes in. When thinking about experience, I thought we really needed, honestly, folks with experience in planning, development, or institutional knowledge. And while Dana, I don't think has the years of experience that some of the other people here do, I think her perspective is unique. And the fact that she came to me, weeks, actually probably a month or 2 ago now, pushing for ideas of equity in the medical marijuana code, meant that, she not only had an understanding for the planning and zoning decisions around it on a high level, she was also able to push for changes, on a complicated subject that would suit a better outcome for the community. I don't have that planning experience. I don't have that background, so it's valued. And there are, by the way, and I want to mention this, there are a few people that are interviewed that have that experience as well. But again, I do value that experience in Dana specifically. And one of the things that really set me over the edge with Dana was her public health background. And I honestly, I didn't know the depth of it before the interview or before the application. I don't think I have to explain to the community why that's important right now. And she touched on Capital Area Michigan Works, probably not knowing, or maybe knowing, honestly, that I was the chair of that administrative board, and their work in finding jobs and the fact that economic growth around job creation, is more than just having the job there and having the qualifications. It's about access, visibility, and good relationships to foster job growth. And I just think that those 2 people really touch on every aspect that we need on the council right now. That being said, candidates like Bazile Taylor, Dan Bowman, Peter Dewan, Chuck Grigsby, and God, honestly, all of them. But still, I will mention them as some of my top choices. Specifically, I think would be great on the council. So I'm ready to hear kind of what the Mayor Pro Tem has to say and what Councilmember Babcock has to say. I know that was a very long explanation, but in all honesty, I just wanted to be very transparent with the public on my thought process and what I was thinking. So, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Aaron. I didn't get the memo that we were supposed to go through every candidate, so.
You don't have to. I just.
In a way, I would like to. I just didn't organize my thoughts in that way for this morning. I think we've all three of us through this process have continually kind of touted the high level of passion and qualification among all of the applicants. And I think, we kind of went on about it so much, I wonder if the community sort of thought that it might be hyperbolic in a way, but hopefully now that everyone has sat through the interviews, they can see what we saw and how difficult this decision is going to be. So I didn't go back to each individual candidate the way that Aaron did. I kind of focused on big themes that came up to me from the interview. So there's a few that I think we can kind of put off to the side and say, like, yes, those are absolutely, everybody's going to bring those up. So COVID, obviously, everyone is concerned about COVID, the response, the recovery, and, also equity and police reform were kind of really a focus of these conversations. So to me, and I think, also just a general recognition that all of us as council members and also all of the candidates really saw these as front and center. So to me, the differences kind of came up in the sub themes that came up. So I think housing insecurity was something that I heard mentioned by multiple candidates. That is something that I don't think we've put enough attention to in East Lansing. I think the idea of active engagement, which, I've tried to do, I'm going to be like totally frank. It's very frustrating as a representative to want to hear all the voices, but kind of lacking a strategy to go out and find those voices. It takes time. Obviously, it takes active engagement. I think I'm re-inspired to commit to that level of community outreach. Very difficult during the distancing of COVID, obviously. But I think we do tend to put a lot of weight on the faces and voices that we hear repeatedly. There's a few members of our community that definitely, show up to every meeting, and we all know who those people are, but there's a lot of people out in our community that don't share that experience and don't have the comfort with the format of government that would make them, comfortable to approach us in that manner. But the decisions that we make obviously affect everyone. So that idea of actively seeking engagement, of kind of not just being content with the people that show up, but like going and seeking the input of people who have not been traditionally engaged by government. I think the commitment to environmental sustainability is there. I think we might tend to look at some of those things as a luxury that we can only address after our immediate problems of infrastructure and, pension liability and those sort of things. But the fact is that's not a luxury. It's a critical area that we really need to commit to action on. And I think I heard that very clearly from many candidates. So I think, anyway, just kind of in terms of community conversation, I think that we definitely saw through this that there's, that there are priorities in our community that need to be addressed in the filling of these 2 council seats. So I really concentrated on my top 9 candidates, which is like still a very large number of people. And I definitely don't want anyone who was not in that top 9 to feel that I didn't value or hear their contribution. I think I want to speak to a comment that was made by one of our call-in people today. I believe 5 people is too small of a council for a city of East Lansing. I think that we have got big city problems, big city level of complication, maybe not problems, but I think 5 voices is too few. That's part of our charter, so that would take a popular vote to change that. But I feel that we would be having a more balanced discussion with 7 council members. That would also make, hopefully we would never be in a position where we had to appoint 4 people, but there's, obviously great people in our community that would do well in this body. And I think we should make spaces for more voices at the table. So I guess I'll just start to go through, I don't know if I want to do it back to front or front to back. The voices that really resonated with me, Dana Watson is definitely one of my top choices. I think, as Erin pointed, her public health background, the fact that she's already doing outreach involved with COVID and COVID response and recovery is critical. I think, demonstrated community service in East Lansing with her commitment to serve on various commissions. I don't think that experience in that way is a prerequisite for public service, but I think that it definitely helps give you a literacy about what is happening. The language of governance it is a separate language. You have to learn it. So I think that people who have some experience on boards and commissions and some experience with showing up to community engagement sessions definitely will shorten the learning curve in terms of being an effective council member. I also really like Dana's example of how she, I think her example was in regards to the income tax, going to a press conference that was held by a group of people that were on the opposite side of the issue. So I see, a commitment to seeking out alternative views, understanding the arguments both for and against. I think, the debate analogy is apt. In debate, you have to be able to equally debate both sides. And I think that's a very critical thinking skill that we don't put as much value on. My second choice is Dan Bowman. I'm kind of thinking back to pre-COVID and pre-police reform. Critical issues facing our community are involved with planning and zoning, land use. I think we absolutely have to put the bulk of our resources right now on the immediate problems, COVID being the absolute top of the list, and the budgetary fallout that is coming from that. But at the same time, we have a limited resource in our community of available land. And so having somebody that values land use, understands zoning, has a high literacy in terms of building, density versus non-dense construction, I think that would be very invaluable as a team member on this. I also appreciated that he was familiar with our strategic priorities and brought those forward as part of his candidate interview. I think that we have kind of lost track of those strategic priorities. We didn't have the pre-budget time that we usually devote to talking about that. We had one interrupted work session that was interrupted due to a blizzard, and then almost immediately our entire budget unraveled due to COVID. And so we have not had a chance to go back and look at that. But I appreciate that he brought that into the conversation. I also didn't realize that he had worked in Kalamazoo and as a municipal employee. I think that's very helpful in terms of doing the work of governing a city. So that was my second choice. And then my third was one of your top 2, Aaron Ron Bacon. Long history of commitment to the community. I also felt that his work in a healthcare adjacent field would be important in terms of the public health response. And then I appreciated that he addressed the budgetary and finance concerns. There's, I think, Ms. Drager brought it forward in her comments today, but part of why we haven't gone back to look at the budget is because there is no budget. There's all money has disappeared basically. And so obviously we do need to look at that. We cannot live in in a void. Much as I wish we could ignore that, we cannot ignore it. We are hemorrhaging money from every part of our budget, and it is going to have devastating and long range consequences. And I saw Mr. Bacon as being somebody that had, you know, a level head, a realistic view, good skills in terms of budget and finance. So he was definitely my top 3. Chuck Grigsby is my number 4. I think you could tell in Chuck's interview, he just has an ability to connect to people soul to soul. He just, you know, it's like a superpower almost. He just really puts people at ease. He's able to bring out their passion and inspiration. And I think having him and his just frankly wide variety of life experience, including small business experience, which I think is going to be very critical moving forward. We are the business devastation that is going to be wrought by COVID, especially if there's a second shutdown. We have small businesses that just barely squeaked through on, you know, by being able to piece together grants and payroll protection loans, and the level of assistance that is going to be available if there is a second shutdown is going to be nowhere near what we had before. I think a lot of those people that barely clung on, especially in the service industry, are going to be in very, very hard times. So somebody that has some small business experience and can kind of help to triage the fallout from that is going to be very important. Peter Dewan is my number 5. I think everything that you said, Aaron, I cannot think of somebody that has had a longer experience of public service in East Lansing. I think his high level of understanding in terms of brownfield, in terms of tax increment financing, in terms of the level of complication that's involved with the finances over the evergreen properties, all of that is going to be very, very valuable going forward. I also, he's going to be term limited out of his position on DDA, so we will lose his leadership in that position at a very critical junction on that project, which I think is going to be very hard to replace. And frankly, he's like basically out of other commissions that he can serve on because he's already been term limited out of so many of them. So I think the other thing he touched on it in his interview, but the level of outreach that he has done to community partners in terms of some of these development projects, he's put together these stakeholder groups to really engage affected community members. And I've always really appreciated that about him and his commitment to that. I think Rod Murphy is my next one. So this is number 6. I don't know how deeply we want to get into this, but I think these are people who, even if we can't appoint them, I would be devastated to lose their contributions to our community. So I'm concerned in some ways that people would feel discouraged by this process, having put themselves forward and then having not been appointed. There's a level of vulnerability with going through these public interviews that I really appreciate that everyone was so willing to put themselves out for this. So Rod Murphy, I think, he's got a huge amount of experience from his time on the school board, making difficult decisions, a level of understanding of budgets and finance that's going to be absolutely crucial. I also really appreciated his suggestion, which is something that's been important to me since I was elected, is the idea of starting friends groups to support some of our community services. I think we absolutely need a Friends of the Parks and Recreation. We already have a Friends group for the Jazz Festival. We already have a Friends group for the library. I think giving our residents the opportunity to be engaged in things that they support in that way through their volunteer commitments or through their financial commitments. I think about the Bailey Community Center and the way that they rallied around, the Bailey Neighborhood Association, the way that they rallied around the parks improvements in Bailey Park, raising, I believe, $20,000 to match the DNR Trust Fund grant on that project because it was important to them to invest in the heart of their neighborhood. And I think we owe it to our community to create the network so that other members can support the types of things in East Lansing that they want to support. Because frankly, we're not going to have the funds to do that because money is imaginary in the post-COVID world. So I thought very highly of Rod. I liked his level-headed, realistic approach to things. I thought that he would be a great partner. Basil Taylor, same as you, Aaron, I did not know this individual before these interviews, and I so want to know him better. Just the demonstrated commitment to service was fantastic. The coalition that he talked about putting together with MSU, the Racial and Social Justice Collaborative, I had no idea that was happening at MSU. So much is happening at MSU that it's very hard to keep track of it all. So that is I will, regardless of what happens in this situation, I will be reaching out for him as a resource to get more connected with the work that he's doing. I think, the things that I mentioned as some of the themes that rose to the top for me, the housing insecurity is huge. I think we tend to look at our student population as being rather privileged. And I think that is a very narrow view of a certain group of our students at MSU. I think we have to really acknowledge to ourselves that is not universally true of that experience, and that there are a lot of people there that are kind of barely hanging on. I thought, yes, there was a lot actually in his. I think that one of the other things that really resonated with me is his kind of take down a bit of the question that I was tasked with asking about equity and inclusion, and really pushing back and saying, it's fine to use these words over and over again, but if we don't acknowledge the real true definition of that, we are really not doing the work in that area, which I do not disagree with at all. I think that is critically true. We tend to say a few things over and over again to the point where the words disappear. And then my final two are John Monberg and Adam DeLay. I think, again, John Monberg is somebody whose resources I would be devastated to lose. He has done just an incredible amount of work on things that are critically important to us. I really, describing the downtown as the heart of the city, I think that's always been part of our vision for downtown. If you look at our master plan and our development strategies, that is our hope for downtown. But I think you can also see that has not been happening. And so, although we work on things with, sorry, a little tickle in my throat. We work on things with the best of intentions. It takes a broader view to really identify why we're missing the mark on that. And so he's another person that, regardless of what happens here, I will be reaching out to him for his input. And then Adam DeLay was my final top 9. I thought, similar to your experience, Aaron, he has, experience in elected service, which is critical, experience with municipal budgets. I thought he did a very good job of articulating the work that we have to do around equity and inclusion. But anyway, so I think in terms of our discussion, maybe revisiting my top 4. So that would be Dana Watson, Dan Bowman, Ron Bacon, and Chuck Grigsby. And then I will let Lisa continue.
Oh, you, Lisa.
Thank you. Well, I looked at this in many ways as if we're filling 3 different jobs with, each person has to fulfill 3 different jobs. And on the one hand is the finance. We're going into really tough times. And the other is equity and inclusion, because many in this community have been in tough times from time immemorial, and we need to address that with every breath and every action. And the third job, as I saw it, was to bring a level of unity to us. What happened a few weeks ago was unprecedented. I've been in government a long, long time and had never seen anything quite like that. We have a lot of division nationally, and locally right now. And so I also see part of this job as someone who can bring the temperature down by about 150 degrees, and that's not an easy skill. When I looked at candidates for this office, I was looking in part, I've been conflicted. In part, I wanted people who weren't like us, who brought different skills than the current three members. I think we all have a background in traditional liberal do-gooderism, and I say that with love. I mean, that is a big part of the American political spirit and American social thought, and we bring that. None of us have a background in finance. We all appreciate education and value it, but we're not here to do that level of education. Mr. Taylor, I would love to put you on the city council, but your talents would be wasted here because you, sir, are going to be the president of Michigan State University or Harvard University or any institution you will choose. And someday I'm going to say, when he was a young man, I got to listen to him interview for East Lansing City Council. Sir, you have so much ahead of you. And while you aren't on my top list for city issues, I'm going to be watching you, and I'm going to be so very thrilled to have seen you once at the very beginning of your career. I often wonder what East Lansing is like for those of us who don't share my experience. There's a difference between sympathy and empathy, and we can sympathize with someone, but empathy is to live it the same way. And Dr. Biber, your tribal roots, the Little Traverse Band, I was in Petoskey and remember that long, long struggle for federal recognition. We often overlook that everything here is owed to the tribes. We often talk about people of color and minorities, and there is a vast array, but too often we forget the tribal nation experience, and we forget to include them in the daily conversation, which is a huge oversight. Ms. Cannon, you are tough. You are fierce. Oh my God, will you come run my life? Or at least I am so impressed with you. And she had called me because many years ago, unknown to me, she worked for my dad. And now I know why Dad thought so highly of you. And to take up reparations in this context and the passion with which you feel that, and being like me, a middle-aged white woman, the depth with which you feel that is extraordinary and special, and please keep going. So many of you would be such excellent candidates for school board because of the drive for education. And we all support education. The city's powers are limited in so many ways. Our powers are limited, as we've seen, with the health code. Our powers are limited by our budget. We don't have a social services apparatus, and it's very unusual in Michigan for a city to have that. Someday, when we're not losing money by the bucket, I would like to do that. That's been on my mind for some time. For those of you with a real passion for education, I can't wait to vote for you for school board or intermediate school board or Lansing Community College Board of Trustees. That's spectacular. I think we've all been listening. We've all been saying the same things, and it's not because we're checking boxes. It's from the heart. And it's hard to have this conversation in public because there are so many people who are so extraordinary who aren't going to get this final vote. And I feel bad about that, genuinely bad. Any one of you, and actually I say this about the East Lansing community as a whole, the remaining 3 or all 5, or even I support moving to 7, all 7, could be struck by an asteroid tomorrow, and there would be 200 people who could step in and take our places. This is a great community. People are engaged, they're committed, they're knowledgeable, and they want to learn. And I've been in government off and on since I was 14 years old, and I learn something new every day. We could all be struck by an asteroid, and East Lansing could have 200 people step in right behind us and do the job equally well. We all have something to contribute, but because everyone in this community has something to contribute, we are all, in a sense, dispensable. I will go to my top 7 in order of appearance. Mr. Bowman. I have spoken with Mr. Bowman before. I think I've met him knocking on his door in Bailey. I'm impressed by his architecture background, that he worked for the city of Kalamazoo. Again, means something to me, because to see the city from an employee perspective is valuable, and we need to be reminded of that. The finance background that you did, owning a small business. I hung out a shingle and it was brutal. I loved the law. I loved representing my clients, but there is no experience quite like that. And I think that's really valuable. In order of appearance, Mr. Bacon. Anyone who can make a professional pivot and keep up their community service, anyone who reaches a certain age and realizes that you have to make a professional pivot can adapt. You can adapt, you're smart. You've got to surrender some pride and do what's right, or embrace something that you didn't know you were able to do. Mr. Dewan, I promised I'd stop saying this, but I've known you since the 80s, and consummate public service. Consummate public service. Mr. Grigsby, fellow classmate from ELVP last year, but you took up an issue and you really did change things, and you will continue to do that. My number 5 would be Mr. Monberg. I had the opportunity to go to Mr. Monberg's class presentation last year. As many people know, I grew up in Lansing, and I share that concern about the disconnect between the industrial city next door and the university, and the chasm that exists. As many of you know, I was a Brownie troop leader last year, and for my littles, their families in South Lansing had no connection whatsoever to the university. And Dr. Momberg really speaks to that and wants to change that. Number 7, again, in order of appearance, Ms. Watson, another ELEP participant from last year. I think we've represented ourselves well. Amazing. Public health is necessary. Was not as confident as I expected in your interview, but people who do things and don't talk about themselves have a hard time with that. And that's what I saw in some of your nervousness about, it's better to do good acts than to present yourself. And I think you live that every day. Last, Mr. Murphy, you truly are a man for others. I grew up going to St. John's, so I have insight into the St. John's, St. Thomas Aquinas merger, at least culturally, what that would mean. And I remember meeting you at your door. Spectacular. So those are my top 7, again, listed in order of appearance. And we've got commonalities. I would also like to say that some of you are doing amazing things, and we need you where you are. We need you on the boards and commissions. And particularly, Peter, we need you on DDA. If you could stay on DDA and run next year, I know that's a tall order, but if you could serve out that DDA term, we need you now more than ever. And I'll make a commitment to support you and knock as many doors as I can. Nope, that's gotta stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just put a sock in it right there. Back to Mr. Stevens.
So before I get into a little bit more deliberations on things, George and Tom, since you guys are on the phone right now, I think what this has pointed out to me more than anything is that I do think we need more than 5 seats on this council, because if I had the option, there would be more people than I'd be selecting today. So that would need to be a vote by the public, correct?
Yeah, I think it'd have to be an amendment to the charter. So it'd have to be a ballot.
So could we prepare something then for our August 11th meeting to vote on? I don't know if that requires a public hearing, then we could introduce it August 11th and have a,
Yeah, I'd have to check also the dates to make sure I believe we're timely for November. You're talking November, right?
Yeah, I would love to do it on this election that's already happening, so that way it would be in place for the next city council election.
Wait, if I may?
Yeah.
I believe that our deadline for the November election is 4 p.m. August 11. So we would
Okay.
need to act before that. I know that for a different point of reference.
I can check with the clerk just to confirm the date for that. But
Thank you.
Check with the clerk, maybe the requirements. I wanna talk about it in public if we can. If that deadline is coming up that quickly though, then maybe we could speak to it. Oh, Emily? Yes.
I just confirmed with Clerk Schuster that 4 p.m. on August 11th is the correct deadline for the November election.
Emily, when is the next regularly scheduled election after November? Do we have one in March at this point?
Let me check 1 second.
2021? Okay, that might be a conversation for later. I honestly can't. Go ahead. Yeah.
The only guaranteed election that we have in 2021 is the November election.
Okay. All right, understood. Then maybe a further conversation can be had with on maybe hosting another meeting.
yeah, we could talk to the city attorney about drafting that and then get back for another meeting. So we can look into that directly on Monday and get back.
Yeah. And that would be a vote of the people too. That wouldn't be up to us. But I mean, I think everybody saw how many incredible people there were. And so, having those different voices on here, it'd be really cool. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I feel strongly enough about it that I would totally support a special meeting in order to get it sooner rather than later. Besides, I see you guys every day now. I don't know what I'll do without you.
Lisa, go ahead.
I think you could live without me, thanks. But yes, I agree, and I completely agree. So
yeah, and that wasn't honestly even a planned discussion. I just think, when the mayor pro tem mentioned it, I just thought to myself, I had such a struggle with this. I mean,
yeah, that was some spontaneous governance right there. That was,
yeah. I hope that didn't go out of line. Tom, I'll ask you if talking about that, we're not taking any action obviously on something like that, but talking about that in public is okay.
Yeah, you can't take any action on a matter that wasn't noticed for the special meeting. So, but that doesn't prevent establishing another meeting later. It just can't be done by action of council today.
Cool. Okay, great. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure we didn't overstep any lines by doing that. But again, I just, I can name 3 people right now that, are not in my, top 2 that I would think would be great on the council and I would appoint today if I could. So I think it's a really worthwhile thing for us to do, especially if we can get it done before the next council election, because then we have that representation there after 2021. Okay, so after hearing names from each individual council member, myself as well, I will go to the mayor pro tem first to give reactions to kind of what we both said, but myself and Councilmember Babcock, and then I'll go to Lisa to do that as well. And then, we will eventually be working towards deliberating for a motion. So, Mayor pro tem.
Yeah, I've been so looking forward to having 2 new team members and also absolutely dreading this discussion. I think we've got so much to gain and also so much to lose in choosing between these people. I just, point of clarification, Lisa, was your list ranked or was that in random order?
My list was simply in the order they appeared for interviews.
Got it.
So,
Could I press upon you to rank it?
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, I mean, and you know,
we're gonna have to.
In some ways, they keep churning. They're churning as of this moment. Number 1. Mr. Bowman. Number 2, Ms. Watson. Number 3, Mr. Bacon. Can I stop at number 4, Mr. Grigsby? But again, you know, Mr. Grigsby is doing such good work on the HRC. But it shouldn't count against doing really good work somewhere else shouldn't count against you. So, I mean, this isn't, well.
Yeah, so that
this is
I
candor. This is as honest as it gets.
This is about as public as it gets. Jesse, just relay, what were your top 4?
Mine were Dana Watson, Dan Bowman, Ron Bacon, and Chuck Grigsby. My 1 and 2 slots were switched with Lisa's. I slightly favored Dana over Dan for my first spot.
Well, just to call a spade, at that point, I think we all had Dana Watson in our top choices. Is that
Agreed.
correct?
Agreed.
Okay. Well then, I will. Tom, I'm gonna have you unmute so I make sure I do this correctly. So I will make a motion to nominate Dana Watson to be appointed to the position of East Lansing City Council member for a partial term ending November 2021.
I'll second.
Take the word nominate out of that and just appoint.
I will make a motion to appoint Dana Watson to the position of East Lansing City Council member for a partial term to end November 2021.
I'll second.
Is that all right, Tom?
Yeah.
All right, and let's do discussion on this because I don't want to just get into the vote. So for all the reasons that I listed in the beginning, I am supporting Dana Watson. I will vote yes on this motion. I think she, again, is a fierce advocate for what she believes in. I think she'll bring a really, really needed voice to this council. I'm looking forward to working with her. I'm looking forward for her to disagree with me, honestly, because I think we do need that. I think we need independent voices on the council, and I think her perspective is going to be really, really valuable. And you know, and I'm going to say this, I've said it 1,000 times. This is not fun. This should be fun because we're having a conversation. We're having a conversation about really, really great people, and there are so many people. You know what, and actually it was just brought to my attention really quickly. I used a phrase that was not all right before, and I didn't realize the phrase calling a spade has racist connotations, and I do apologize about that. I did not realize that, honestly, but I am 100% open to say when I have made a mistake, and that was definitely a mistake. But back to the original statement, Dana is incredible. She has done a lot for this community. She has done work in terms of equity. She has done work in terms of inclusion. She has done work in terms of planning. She has done work in terms of advocacy. And she's done work in terms of public health, which I think we need right now. I'm going to be proud to serve with her. And I cannot, there are a lot of really, really great people that applied, but I can't think of a better person to appoint. So that is why I'll be voting yes on the motion. And again, I do apologize for that. That was out of tone for me, and I'm happy to admit a mistake when I didn't know that I made one, but it was brought to my attention.
Just to speak to the motion, I will also be supporting Dana. She's my top choice, primarily due to her public health, primarily due to her confluence of great qualifications that make her the most my first choice. I think the realities of COVID are going to follow us for a very long time. And I think somebody whose professional experience speaks to outreach on mitigating the effects of that is going to be a very great partner in this. So I am looking forward to voting yes on this.
I'm also going to vote yes on this. Obviously, she's one of my top. I hope, thought this a little belatedly, I hope that that the city's interest in COVID doesn't cause her conflict on her job, because sometimes we have a different view than her boss, County Health Department. But I think if anyone can navigate that with savvy and inform us well, it's Ms. Watson. And I think, as hard as this was, I think that's the easy appointment. So we can vote on this, and things are only going to get harder in the next 5 minutes. Thank you.
All right, Jackson, I will call for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Babcock,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg,
Yes.
Mayor Stevens.
Yes. With 3 in the affirmative, that motion passes. Dana Watson will be appointed to the position of East Lansing City Council member, and we will discuss kind of how to do next steps after this. Again, I did just want to apologize. I didn't realize that statement had that connotation, and I truly would not have made it had I known that. But I do want to apologize for that. Okay, so back to the discussion at hand. Our second slot. We have many great people that are here, and we have to come to some kind of decision. You had both had Dan Bullman listed in your top 2, and Ron Bacon listed as your top 3. I would say that, my order and 4 would have been, Dana Watson and Ron Bacon as my top 2 in no particular order, and then Dan Bullman, Chuck Grigsby as my next 2. So we're all, I think, under very similar opinions on that, and I honestly don't know how to proceed on that. It's kind of a little bit unprecedented. We're having this discussion, completely in public for, those who are watching. This isn't scripted. This isn't something that was decided behind the scenes. This is just something we're kind of doing right here because we wanted to do it in the public, but that does not make it easier. So go ahead, Lisa.
We're well served, no matter which of these gentlemen is seated. The city is well served, very well served. I don't know how this is going to go. But I feel bad. I feel bad because, part of it is what moves Mr. Grigsby to my number 4 is how much we need him on HRC, just like how much I feel we need Mr. Dewan right now in DDA, and doing a good job should not penalize you. Mr. Bowman's doing a great job on Planning Commission as well. Really, I could go either way. Somebody else?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, it's really hard. I guess it comes down, I mean, I'm tempted to say something like, paper, rock, scissors, but I feel like my sense of humor would not be appreciated. I'm not taking this lightly, although I definitely feel Councilmember Babcock's statement that any three of these individuals would serve us very well. So in terms of my preference between the three people remaining, I guess I have to look at it in terms of what are the most critical issues that are going to face the city in this next calendar year. And I think, to me, that's going to come down to finance and budget. I think that development in East Lansing is going to continue, but I suspect that the pace will be greatly affected by the COVID fallout. So I think that having somebody with a strong background in site plans and zoning, although still very critically important to the work of council, is probably not going to be our greatest priority in the next 16 months, which is how long this term is going to be. And I think that slightly edges Ron Bacon into my preferred second slot, just because I think of these three candidates, I see him with the most skill in finance and budgeting. So
Okay.
that's my feedback.
Lisa, what is your take on what Jesse just said?
I agree, although I'd also say that, Mr. Bowman has some business background in running a business.
Absolutely.
He studied it as part of his formal education. I just see them as both bringing that skill to the table and being neck and neck. I honestly, I will be very proud to serve with either one of these gentlemen, and I don't want to say no to either one. So, Mr. Mayor, you are the mayor. Your turn, sir.
Okay. Then based on this conversation, very, very open and difficult conversation, I will say, I will make a motion to appoint Ron Bacon to fill the vacant council seat for a partial term ending in November 2021. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Has been seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. Is there any discussion on this matter? We've had a lot. Lisa?
Again, I think we've had a lot, and I think that we can unanimously support Mr. Bacon because of his many attributes. And again, we do that with no disrespect to Mr. Bowman or anyone else. Perhaps soon we'll have 2 more seats, and we will still have many, many more talented and qualified people than we can seat. All of you, please consider running, consider running against us, being on those commissions, staying involved. Call or email us any time of the day, anytime, because you have so much to offer. I want you all involved. I want to hear from all of you all the time. again, for me, this could have gone either way. I will be proud to serve with either gentleman. I think we should make this a unanimous vote for Mr. Bacon. And I can also vote yes for Mr. Bacon for who he is rather than just unanimity. Thank you.
Could the city attorney read back my motion to make sure that that was worded correctly?
Yeah, that was worded properly.
Okay. Just as a clarification, that was a nomination for Ron Bacon to be appointed to a partial term of the city council ending November 2021. All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg,
Yes.
Mayor Stevens.
Yes. Okay. That is an affirmative vote for 2 vacant seats on the city council. George, did you have something to say before we get into?
I just wanted to congratulate the new members on being appointed. I will be reaching out to them this week to set up quick orientations and swearing-ins as well. And also to thank council and all the applicants for the deliberative process and transparent process. Thank you.
Aaron, can I take a point of privilege?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm going to laugh or cry. That was really, really hard. Apparently I'm going to cry. I didn't know that I was going to cry. I was really inspired by this. Not just by the 13 people that we interviewed, but by the full slate of applicants. I am planning on reaching out to everyone personally. It's going to take me a while to schedule personal meetings with everyone who applied, but I want to connect with all of you. You know, hopefully learn from your feedback and your passion that brought you forward to put yourselves forward for this position. It's going to be a really hard term. So I don't know if I should say congratulations or condolences to Dana and Ron for joining us. This is going to be a really difficult year. But I'm looking forward to serving with you.
Lisa, did you have anything?
Yes, thank you. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard, and we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it in the same way my grandparents got through the Great Depression and World War II. We're going to get through it because this is a strong community and a resilient community, and we know that we have depth and breadth of talent. And most importantly, we have people who care. I congratulate our 2 new members. I genuinely look forward to serving with both of you. I know you can do this job, and I know many others could have as well. And again, my only regret, and I said it before we even saw the applications, is that we can only seat 2. And thank you very much.
Okay, I will take a point of personal privilege as well. This is really hard. This is really, really hard. We had so many great people that applied and that were part of this process, and I wish that we could have appointed everyone. Everybody has a voice and everybody has a perspective that's needed, and there were just so many skills at the table too. And you know, when I thought about this process, I really wanted to just make it as public as possible. But that also means that we have these really tough, open discussions in public. you know, where you guys get to see our thought process, see what we're going through, and understand, you know, really where the decision came out of. And it was really, really tough. You know, we did just make history, though, in the city of East Lansing. We now have a city council that is a majority people of color. I don't think that's ever happened before. And I want to take a moment to recognize that. Because in this conversation about equity and in this conversation in this country right now, that's a beautiful thing. I think that these people are going to be inundated with a lot of work. And I think that everybody that applied should still stay involved and stay as part of the community. I know many people will. But I'm gonna do something that I really didn't get to do because I didn't pick to be in this seat. So I ran to make East Lansing a better place. I felt like I lost that in the past week or so. I didn't choose this role, and honestly, I felt like my role in the past couple of weeks has been to put out fires. Being reactive rather than being passionate and pushing forward. You know, we have a lot of challenges moving forward, but we also have incredible opportunity. I've been in meetings all month talking about COVID response, coordinating with MSU, Ingham County, Governor's Office, and others talking through to make sure students' return will be safe. And that coordination, that sense of togetherness, and the opportunity that's presented to intersect response to the pandemic can yield really long-term results in terms of coordination with regional partners in the future. And just to touch on how I want this council to run. I want this council to be a little bit messy. I want us to ask a lot of questions, and I want us to discuss things multiple times. I asked the city manager probably a day ago, what if we had 2 discussion-only meetings a month? What if we had 2 opportunities for staff to bring us things, for council just talk about stuff, you know? And he said, actually, that's how we were doing it a while ago. And so I'm going to try and bring that back, because I think that if we have discussions, even if it's just a discussion about what's on our business agenda the next meeting, you know, we have 2 open conversations about it. There's opportunity to ask questions. There's opportunity to really get into the weeds of things. I can't promise that we're all always going to agree on things, that every vote that I take is right, or that I'm going to do the right thing every single time. But I can promise that we're going to push forward, and I'm going to do the best job I can to empower every member of council to push their agenda, because that's my job, and that's how I view it. I think under seemingly insurmountable circumstances, we can leave the community better than we found it. We can endure, persist, and move this city forward, even if this year we were knocked a few steps back. I'm going to work, this council is going to work, and we are going to push things forward into a very bright future for East Lansing. I'm ready to go. Let's get to work.
Go team.
Thank you for everybody coming in and attending, everybody that participated in the process. And we will be back online sometime very soon. That is the rest of the agenda. So we are now adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.